Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Midnight 18 Meridian Mall. I've always been the type to chase a good story. As a freelance journalist specializing in urban exploration pieces, I've ventured into my fair share of abandoned buildings, decrepit hospitals with peeling walls that seem to whisper their histories, forgotten hotels where phantom guests still seem to linger, and factories where the ghosts of industry past almost materialized in the dust motes dancing through broken windows. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I encountered at Meridian Mall. The assignment seemed straightforward enough. My editor had heard rumors about the Meridian Mall, a shopping center built in the late 80s that had supposedly closed down in 2008 during the recession. The place had become something of a local legend in the small town of Graywick. Kids dared each other to break in at night. Local paranormal enthusiasts claimed to have recorded strange phenomena inside. What made this particular abandoned mall interesting was that, according to some accounts, it didn't look abandoned at all. The stores never actually closed, my editor said over the phone. That's what makes it weird. People say when they peek through the windows, everything's still there, mannequins, merchandise, even food in the food court, like everyone just vanished one day. I'd heard similar stories before. Usually they were exaggerated. Sometimes a property owner would leave things behind if the cost of removal exceeded the value of the items. I figured this was just another case of an abrupt closure where they hadn't bothered to clear everything out. Get some good photos, my editor instructed. People eat this stuff up, urban decay porn with a side of spooky. I arrived in Graywick on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The small town had that quintessential autumn in New England feel, fiery foliage, pumpkins on porches, and a crisp chill that promised winter wasn't far off. I checked into the only motel in town, a place called the Pinewood Inn that had seen better days but was clean enough. The elderly woman at the front desk perked up when I mentioned I was in town to write about Meridian Mall. "Oh honey, you don't want to go poking around that place," she said, sliding my room key across the counter. Her hand trembled slightly. "Nothing good comes from that mall, not anymore." I smiled politely. "I'm just doing a piece on abandoned places. I won't be breaking anything or stealing." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's not about breaking and entering, dear. That place, it's not right. People go in and they come out different if they come out at all." I thanked her for the warning, chalking it up to small-town superstition. Every place like this had its local haunted spot that older residents spoke about in hushed tones. It made for good color in my article, but nothing more. After settling into my room, I drove out to get a look at the mall before nightfall. I wanted to scout the location, find entry points, and plan my approach for later that night when I'd do the actual exploration and photography. Meridian Mall sat about 2 miles outside of town, surrounded by an enormous parking lot now cracked and sprouting weeds through the asphalt. The building itself was a massive single-story structure with a few larger department stores rising to 2 levels at each end. Its beige exterior was weathered but not dilapidated. No graffiti marked its walls, which struck me as unusual for an abandoned property. I circled the building in my car, noting that all the entrances were chained and padlocked. The glass doors and windows were intact but coated with a layer of grime that made it difficult to see inside. I parked near what had once been the main entrance and got out to take a closer look. Peering through the grimy glass, I could make out the main concourse stretching into darkness. What caught my attention was how pristine it looked. No debris, no signs of vandalism or decay. The planters still had plants in them, artificial, I assumed. A directory board stood in the center, and benches lined the walkway. It looked as if the mall had closed yesterday, not 12 years ago. As I pressed my face closer to the glass, trying to see more, I noticed something that made me step back. In the dimness inside, I could have sworn I saw movement, just a flicker of motion down one of the corridors. Probably just a shadow or a trick of the light, I told myself. I returned to my motel, had dinner at a local diner, and waited until well after midnight before heading back to the mall. Urban exploration is technically trespassing, so I always went at hours when I was least likely to be spotted or interrupted. The parking lot was eerily silent when I arrived just after 1 a.m. No other cars, no signs of security, perfect conditions. I parked at the far end of the lot, grabbed my backpack containing my camera equipment, flashlights, and other gear, and made my way toward a service entrance I'd spotted earlier. The lock on the service door was substantial, but not impossible. After about 10 minutes of work with my lock-picking set, a skill I'd learned specifically for urban exploration, I heard the satisfying click of the mechanism releasing. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing at the slight creak of hinges that probably hadn't moved in years. The service corridor was pitch black. I switched on my flashlight, revealing a plain hallway with concrete floors and cinder block walls. Nothing unusual here. I made my way forward, following the corridor until I reached another door that I presumed would lead into the mall proper. I opened it and stepped through, and that's when the first wave of wrongness hit me. The mall was illuminated, not fully lit like during business hours, but a soft, ambient light filled the space. Emergency lighting, I assumed, though it seemed unusually comprehensive for a closed building. The main concourse stretched before me, and what I saw confirmed what I'd glimpsed earlier. The mall didn't look abandoned, at all. Storefronts with their gates pulled only halfway down revealed fully stocked interiors. Mannequins posed in frozen fashion displays. A fountain in the central court contained water that seemed clean, not stagnant. Plants, real ones, not artificial as I'd assumed, stood in planters looking healthy. What the hell, I whispered to myself. The logical explanation was that the mall wasn't actually abandoned. Perhaps it was being maintained for some reason, maybe pending a sale or redevelopment. But if that were the case, why all the local legends? Why was it chained up and locked, and why did it feel so wrong? Because it did feel wrong. Despite the clean, maintained appearance, there was something profoundly unsettling about the space. The air felt heavy and still, yet somehow charged with a subtle energy that raised the hair on my arms. And there was a smell, not the musty scent of abandonment I was accustomed to, but something sickly sweet, like overripe fruit on the verge of rotting. I decided to proceed with my exploration. If nothing else, this would make for an interesting angle, the abandoned mall that wasn't really abandoned. I moved down the main concourse, taking photos as I went. My footsteps echoed loudly despite my attempt to walk quietly, the sound bouncing off the high ceiling and returning to me distorted. The first store I approached was a clothing retailer called Fashion Forward. Its security gate was halfway down, allowing me to duck underneath. Inside, racks of clothing stood neatly arranged. Price tags still hung from sleeves. A cash register sat on the counter, its display dark. I ran my finger along a shelf, expecting dust, but found none. Everything was clean, as if it had been recently maintained. I checked a price tag on a jacket, $49.99. The style looked dated, definitely from the late 2000s, but the condition was perfect. As I moved deeper into the store, I noticed something odd about the mannequins. Their poses seemed unnatural, not the typical posed stances of retail displays, but twisted slightly, as if caught in mid-motion. One had its head turned at an angle that would be uncomfortable for a human neck. Another had fingers splayed in what looked almost like a gesture of panic. I took several photos and moved on, ducking back under the gate into the main concourse. The food court was my next stop. Tables and chairs stood arranged as if waiting for customers. Behind the counters of the fast food stalls, I could see equipment and even what appeared to be food items. I approached Burger Bonanza and peered over the counter. On the warming tray sat several burger patties. They didn't look old or moldy. They looked fresh. Beside them, a basket of fries sat under a heat lamp that wasn't on. I reached out hesitantly and touched a fry. It was cold but pliable, not dried out as it should have been after years of abandonment. "This isn't possible," I muttered, stepping back from the counter. That's when I heard it, a sound from elsewhere in the mall, a soft, sliding noise like something being dragged across the floor. I froze, listening intently. It came again, followed by what sounded like a muffled voice. Security guard. Another urban explorer. I wasn't eager to find out. I dimmed my flashlight and moved quietly toward the source of the sound, hugging the wall. The noise had come from a corridor leading to restrooms. I peered around the corner and saw nothing. The hallway was empty, the restroom doors closed. I was about to turn back when one of the doors, the one marked Women, creaked open slightly. I held my breath, waiting for someone to emerge. No one did. The door simply hung open a few inches, revealing darkness beyond. Against my better judgment, I approached. "Hello," I called softly. "Anyone there?" No response. I pushed the door open wider, shining my flashlight inside. The restroom looked immaculate, sinks gleaming, floor tiles shining as if recently mopped. No sign of anyone. I was about to leave when my light caught something on the mirror, writing that appeared to be done in lipstick or some other red substance. It read, "They never left." A chill ran down my spine. Graffiti in an abandoned place wasn't unusual, but something about this message, combined with the inexplicably maintained state of the mall, deeply unsettled me. I backed out of the restroom and continued my exploration, now moving with more caution. I passed a toy store called Wonder World with stuffed animals arranged in the window display. One of them, a large teddy bear, seemed to be looking directly at me, though I knew that was just my imagination working overtime in the creepy environment. I took a photo of the display and checked it on my camera's screen. The image made me freeze. In the photo, the teddy bear's head was turned at a different angle than what I was seeing in front of me. I looked back at the actual display. The bear was positioned as it had been before, not as it appeared in my photo. "It's just a trick of the light," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. My voice sounded strange in the empty mall, too loud and somehow muffled at the same time. I continued to the east wing of the mall, where one of the anchor department stores was located. Hartwell's, the sign read above the entrance. Unlike the smaller stores, Hartwell's had no security gate. Its glass doors stood closed but unlocked. I pushed one open and stepped inside. The department store was vast and dark, with only minimal emergency lighting casting long shadows between racks of clothing and display cases. The air felt even heavier in here, almost oppressive. I moved through the store, taking photos of the perfectly preserved merchandise displays. In the housewares section, table settings were arranged as if for a dinner party that never happened. In electronics, outdated computers and flip phones sat in locked display cases. When I reached the back of the store, I found the employee areas. A door marked "Staff Only" was ajar. I pushed it open to find a break room with a table, chairs, and kitchenette. On the table sat several paper cups and an open box of donuts. The donuts looked fresh, with no signs of mold or decay. Next to the donut box was a newspaper. I picked it up, expecting to see a date from 2008 when the mall allegedly closed. Instead, the newspaper was dated October 17, 2023, yesterday. I dropped the paper as if it had burned me. This wasn't possible. Either someone was maintaining this place in an extremely bizarre fashion, or I didn't want to consider the alternative. I decided I'd seen enough. This place was getting to me, playing tricks on my mind. I would come back in daylight, maybe try to find information about the mall's current ownership. There had to be a logical explanation. I retraced my steps through Hartwell's, moving quickly now. As I approached the exit back to the main concourse, I noticed something I hadn't seen on my way in, a mannequin standing just inside the doorway. It hadn't been there before, I was certain of it. The mannequin was different from the others I'd seen, more realistic, with detailed facial features and jointed limbs. It wore a Hartwell's uniform, a red vest over a white shirt with a name tag that read Emma. I gave it a wide berth as I passed, an irrational fear gripping me that it might reach out and grab me. Back in the main concourse, I turned toward the service corridor through which I'd entered. That's when I saw them. Mannequins, dozens of them, positioned throughout the concourse. They hadn't been there before, I was absolutely certain of that. They stood in groups of 2 or 3, some seated on benches, others positioned near store entrances. All wearing clothing from the mall's various shops, all with the same uncannily realistic appearance as the one in Hartwell's. And they all seemed to be facing in my direction. I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. I knew, these hadn't been here when I walked through earlier. Someone was messing with me, had to be. Someone had followed me in, was playing an elaborate prank. "Very funny," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "You got me, you can come out now." My words echoed back to me, no response. I took a deep breath and started walking briskly toward the exit, keeping my eyes fixed ahead and trying to ignore the mannequins in my peripheral vision. As I passed the fountain, I heard a splash that made me jump. I looked over involuntarily. The water was moving, rippling as if someone had just trailed their fingers through it. I walked faster, nearly jogging now. The service corridor was just ahead, past the Cinema 8 theater entrance. As I approached, I glanced at the theater's poster displays. They showed current movies, films that had been released this year, not in 2008. The door to the service corridor was closed. I was sure I'd left it open. I reached for the handle, turned it locked. No, I muttered, jiggling the handle frantically. I tried my lock picks with shaking hands, but I couldn't steady them enough to work effectively. Behind me I heard a sound, the soft squeak of something like rubber or plastic moving against the polished floor. I didn't turn around, I didn't want to see. I abandoned the door and moved quickly toward the main entrance. It was chained from the outside, but maybe I could break the glass. I had a multi-tool in my backpack that included a hammer head. As I crossed the concourse, I felt the atmosphere change. The air became thicker, harder to breathe, and the sickly sweet smell intensified. The ambient lighting flickered, momentarily plunging the space into darkness before returning. In that brief moment of darkness, I heard movement. Lots of movement, the sound of dozens of objects shifting position at once. When the lights came back on, the mannequins had moved. They were closer now, arranged in a loose semicircle around my path to the main entrance. Their positions had changed, arms outstretched, heads tilted as if in curiosity, some with legs positioned mid-step. "This isn't real," I said aloud. "This is some kind of hallucination." I closed my eyes, counted to 3, and opened them again. The mannequins were closer, much closer. The nearest one, a female figure in a summer dress, was only about 10 feet away from me. I ran, sprinting past the mannequins toward the main entrance. I pulled out my multi-tool and extended the hammer attachment. The glass doors were tempered, but if I hit them hard enough at the right spot, they'd shatter. I reached the doors and struck the glass with all my strength. The hammer bounced off, leaving not even a scratch. I tried again and again, putting all my weight behind each blow. Nothing. Desperate now, I turned to look for another exit. What I saw made my blood run cold. The mannequins had formed a complete circle around me, standing shoulder to shoulder, blocking every possible path. And they were different now. Their blank faces had changed. Features had become more defined, more human. Some had faint suggestions of expressions, a hint of a smile, a furrowed brow, wide eyes, and they were all staring directly at me. "What do you want?" I shouted, pressing my back against the glass doors. "What is this place?" a voice answered, not from any of the mannequins, but seemingly from the mall itself, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We want what you have," it said, a chorus of whispers that somehow formed words. Life, warmth, time. One of the mannequins, the one in the summer dress, took a step forward. Its movement was jerky but deliberate, like someone learning to walk. Its head tilted as it regarded me. "The mall never closed," the voice continued. "We never left. We can't leave, but you can stay." Another mannequin moved, and another. Their limbs creaked as they advanced, step by halting step. "Join us," the voice whispered. "Be part of Meridian Mall, forever." I scrambled along the glass, looking for any weakness, any escape. My hand found a service panel near the floor, some kind of maintenance access I hadn't noticed before. I pulled at it desperately, and to my surprise, it opened. The space beyond was dark, but it was large enough for me to crawl through. Without hesitation, I dove in, pulling the panel closed behind me. I found myself in a narrow maintenance tunnel, barely lit by small emergency lights spaced far apart. I crawled forward as quickly as I could, hearing scratching sounds on the panel behind me, like plastic fingers trying to pry it open. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning beneath the mall. I crawled until my knees and palms were raw, driven forward by pure terror. Finally, the tunnel ended at a grate that opened into what looked like a parking garage. I pushed through the grate and emerged in the mall's underground parking level. It was dark and cold, with only a few emergency lights casting a dim glow over rows of cars. Cars, dozens of them, covered in a thick layer of dust. I approached the nearest one and wiped the dust from the license plate. The registration sticker read 2008. I moved to another car and another, all with registration dates ranging from the early 2000s to 2008. These were the cars of shoppers and employees who had been at the mall when what had happened here. At the far end of the garage, I saw an exit ramp leading up to the outside world. I ran toward it, desperate for escape, for fresh air, for normality. I was halfway to the ramp when I noticed something moving between the cars, shadows that seemed more solid than they should be. And mannequins emerging from behind vehicles, stepping out from concrete pillars, all moving with that same jerky but purposeful gait. I ran faster, reaching the ramp and charging up it toward the night sky visible at the top. Behind me, I heard the scratch and clatter of dozens of plastic bodies in pursuit. The ramp seemed to stretch impossibly long, the exit remaining distant despite my desperate sprint. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed on, driven by the sounds of pursuit growing ever closer. Finally, I burst through the exit onto the parking lot. The cool night air hit me like a blessing, and I gulped it down in heaving breaths. My car sat where I'd left it, at the far end of the lot. I ran toward it, fumbling for my keys. I reached the car, unlocked it with shaking hands, and threw myself into the driver's seat. As I started the engine, I looked back at the mall. Figures stood at the exit of the ramp, silhouetted against the dim light behind them. They didn't follow me onto the lot. They simply stood, watching, dozens of them lined up at the boundary of the mall property. I drove away as fast as I dared, not slowing until I reached the motel. I packed my things in a frenzy and checked out immediately, ignoring the concerned questions of the night clerk. I drove straight through until morning, putting as much distance between myself and Greywick as possible. I never wrote the article. I never showed anyone the photos I took that night. Because when I finally worked up the courage to look at them days later, every single image showed the same thing. An empty, decrepit mall with broken windows, debris-strewn floors, and clear signs of long abandonment. No mannequins. No fresh food, no maintained stores, except for one photo, the last one I took, of the mannequins surrounding me near the main entrance. In that image, they weren't mannequins at all. They were people. People with blank, desperate eyes and stretched, unnatural smiles. People wearing clothing from different eras, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and even more recent styles. And in the background, barely visible in the dim light, was a store directory with a date displayed on its digital screen. October 18, 2023, the day after my visit. I've spent the month since that night researching Meridian Mall, trying to make sense of what happened. I found newspaper archives about its closure, not in 2008 as I'd been told, but in 1993 after a series of disappearances. People who went shopping and never came out, staff who clocked in for shifts and vanished. The mall was eventually shut down after the disappearances reached double digits with no explanations found. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. According to local newspaper archives, the mall was demolished in 1995. The entire structure was torn down and the land has been vacant ever since. Yet I was there. I walked its corridors, I saw what lives inside it. Sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear that chorus of whispers, "Join us, be part of Meridian Mall, forever." And I wonder, am I really safe? Did I truly escape? Or am I just experiencing the final, comforting delusion of a mind that can't accept what really happened? Because lately, I've noticed things. My skin feels different, smoother, harder. My joints sometimes catch when I move too quickly. And this morning, when I woke up and looked in the mirror just for a moment, just for the briefest instant, I thought I saw a name tag on my chest. It read Emma.